6 playoff wins was what they had on the road from 1980 through 2003. Now they have 8 in the last 2 years. What makes this team so effective away from Verizon Center?
I actually have a theory about this.
Okay,
and I'm sure that
that's why we're asking you.
I'm sure it's a theory that would be rejected by fancy statisticians, but I think that people still sort of underestimate them a little bit. And we saw in Toronto in Game 2, they were down like 11 too early, and everyone, at least online that I was following, everyone assumed, oh, this game's over. Toronto's going to win this game. We saw it in Atlanta. They were down 13 in the first half. Everyone's like, this isn't the Raptors. Now the Wizards are seeing what life is really like. And in both of those games, I sort of thought, man, they still have a push coming. They definitely have a second half push coming. And in both of those cases, they pulled away, and by the end, it wasn't even really dramatic. I mean, it was like, I guess, a 6-point game at the end of the Hawks game. But I feel like the Wizards just really didn't play very well in the regular season, and there's like a tendency to think they're maybe not that good of a team, and if you punch them once, they're going to be out, and that doesn't seem to be the team that we're faced with in the playoffs here. So my theory is that the teams just aren't kind of taking them seriously enough, I guess.
Neil, is that you buy into that, or is there something else behind it?
I do, because the stats aren't suggesting that they're a better team on the road than they are at home. At home in the playoffs, they scored 23.7 points, net points per 100 possessions. On the road, that falls to 11. Their effective field goal possession at home, 60%. On the road, 49%. So, yeah, I mean, I could actually buy into that, because there's nothing necessarily that they're doing better on the road. It's more that the other team is performing worse, and the Wizards are benefiting as a result of it.
Well, Scott, we talked so much in the playoffs about home court advantage, home field advantage, what have you. Wizards don't seem to need that. What's your theory behind it?
I think it's getting to the point where a better question might be, like, what makes Randy Whitman such a good playoff coach after what we saw, especially in the second half of this season. I mean, this is not a good road team in the regular season. They're the only team remaining in the playoffs that had a losing road record at 17-24. I think this doesn't explain last year, but certainly having a guy like Paul Pierce, who was in the Raptors' head, certainly for Game 1 and throughout that series, that helps, having those veterans around. But I think Dan's theory is as good as any, that a lot of people thought the Raptors were going to roll in that first series.
Well, underestimating, that doesn't explain the Game 2, though, and how they've gone undefeated. I mean, you can underestimate on one game, right, and then kind of get back on track if you're the higher seed, but that hasn't happened.
I mean, that's just like a mild theory. I mean, I think the other thing, if you look at this year, they're undefeated at home also. You know, maybe they're just better than the Raptors, and you know, the Hawks were not playing their best basketball down the stretch, and so this should be a competitive series. But, you know, I think maybe the Wizards have just kind of matched up well with both of their opponents.
Yeah, and they're playing differently too, right? I mean, this isn't the mid-range jumper team we saw during the regular season. They switched the lineup. I mean, Whitman sandbagged us all. I mean, he's definitely playing a different brand of basketball in the playoffs.
And the other thing you could say about the Hawks is, in that first game at least, they were just coming off, you know, less than 48 hours rest after.
They shot terrible.
They shot way better in the first half than the second half. So you could say maybe tired legs or whatever. But if tired legs is a valid playoff excuse, you would think that the Clippers would have done something other than run the Rockets off the floor after, 48 hours after dispatching the Spurs. So I don't know if I really buy that one.
And the same thing kind of happened last year with the Pacers, who had an unexpectedly tough time in the first round series where the Wizards kind of rolled over the Bulls.
Scott, I wondered, you mentioned Whitman doing a great job coaching the playoffs, and he has. But would you not think that going into the playoffs, if you haven't tried these lineups, how confident are you going to be that they're going to work? I mean, this is kind of a chance that he took, and it's paid off, right? In a way.
I mean, he kind
you
of
didn't play Paul at the stretch 4 during the regular season, and all of a sudden it's going to work in the playoffs. How can you be so sure of that? It has.
Right, you can't be sure. Yeah. I mean, Neil talked about sandbagging. Maybe this was something that he had seen in practice, that he had in his back pocket. I mean, obviously the minutes were limited for Paul Pierce throughout the regular season. But yeah, moving into stretch 4, rediscovering the 3-point shot and taking less long twos. I mean, it's all worked out. And hey, praise to Randy Whitman.
That's a huge gamble, though, right? Like
that's
you said,
what I'm saying.
It's, here you are going in with expectations into the playoffs, and if you try something completely new and it doesn't work, I mean, Whitman could be run out of town.
You know, I think I use this stat too. I think the Wizards attempted at least 23 pointers in 20% of the regular season games, and they've done it in 80% of their playoff games.
Yeah, it's a whole different team.